Good afternoon. Welcome to you all. It's great that you can join us this afternoon for our session about placements and particularly beginning to think about identifying placements and planning your applications. My name is Mark Johnson. I'm the SENSS Deputy Director, and I'm here together this afternoon with Jenny. Jenny, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Wilders, and I'm the SENSS Training and Development Manager.
Wonderful. And just to say, for those of you that have just joined us, we are recording today's session to make it available for those who were not able to join us this afternoon. And for this first part of the session, we're asking you not to have your cameras or your audio on, your mics on, to keep yourselves on mute. At the end of our presentation, then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. In the meantime, if there are things that you wanted to raise, just feel free to put them in the chat. That's fine. We'll either pick them up as we go or wait till the end when we can respond to your any questions that you might have or comments or things that are coming up there. I think without further ado, let's make a start. Jenny, do you want to move the slides forward, please? Okay, so just to quickly recap for you, you will all probably know that all of our students, we expect you to complete a placement of 3 months during your PhD. And this involves you going to work with an organization for an agreed period on a defined project or research area. Now, we can be flexible in terms of how we approach this to meet both the needs of the host organization as well as, of course, your own needs. They can vary in length and hours worked and location. In other words, you might do the 3 months over in a more extended period of time. And of course, if you're a part-time student as well, there'll be flexibility in how we think about organizing the placement in relationship to that. The critical factor in terms of your studentship is that 3-month placement period is factored into the studentship that you've been awarded. And again, the expectation is that you will undertake a placement during the PhD. If you are unable, for whatever reason, to undertake a placement, of course, then your studentship funding would be reduced by that period. But our hope, certainly, we're going to work to support you to ensure that you are able to undertake that placement. The only other thing to say at the outset as a reminder is that you should be aiming to complete your placement no more than 3 months, no less than 3 months before your funding end date. That's just to ensure that you have good time to wrap up anything with your thesis research and submitting the thesis and getting that all in a timely manner. Great. Next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, so just as a reminder, why are placements important? Placements are really aimed at addressing key development needs for doctoral researchers that extend beyond the kind of conventional PhD researcher training. And it's about supporting and facilitating you to have engagement with research organizations, with business and industry, policymakers, and or third sector organizations. So really kind of helping you expand that training that you receive. And the kinds of things that we're looking for the placements to do is to give you an exposure to diverse work environments as professional researchers so that you acquire a practical understanding of how academic research fits into real world applications, particularly outside of a university setting, to give you additional sorts of skills development. I'll come back to that in a minute, really to provide experiential learning that enables you to acquire new skills that complement and extend academic knowledge and support your own personal development. It provides key networking opportunities. It will give you access to research professionals, mentors, and contacts across these different industries that you and sectors that you might work in, as well as through that also extending your academic networks. And critically, in relationship to that, it also provides important platforms and stepping stones in terms of career advancement. So, through the contacts that you cultivate, through the experience that you acquire, it's all about kind of enhancing your CVs and preparing and equipping you for your post-PhD life and work as professional researchers. Next slide, please, Jenny. This is a moment to kind of thank you for completing your development needs analysis, and we're really pleased that we had a really good success rate, and you all completed within a timely manner the DNA, and we are now working our way through that. One of the striking things, having looked at your development needs analysis, is that overall it seems you are generally very confident about, you have a sense that many of the things in terms of these different domains that you feel are well developed or indeed very confident about. And there's a smaller proportion of areas that you kind of consistently feel across the board requires improvement across those 4 domains. If we go to the next slide, what is interesting though is that it's particularly in the areas of domain D, that is in terms of engagement, influence, and impact, in terms of working with others, particularly others outside of academia, in terms of communication skills, and really thinking about, public engagement and the impact of your research. Those are the areas that consistently that you have indicated as areas that requires improvement. Now that is not a surprise as you're just embarking on your PhD work, and it really relates to this emphasis on doing placements as well, because it's through the placements that a lot of those things that you're indicating as needing work and requiring improvement, these are the things that we think placements will really in particular enable and equip you with those additional skills. So it's just interesting to kind of think about beginning to think about placements in relationship to the development needs analysis that you've all recently completed here. Let's go on to the next slide then, Jenny. So in terms of then thinking of the sorts of placement opportunities that there might be. So let's think of it broadly across, and all the kind of different sectors that you might work in. Of course, one is industry placements. So you might have an internship in a business that offers possibilities for placements. I mean, this could be any number of things. It could be in tech industry. It could be in engineering. It could be in industries that are, customer focused and things like that. I mean, really, the sky is the limit here. If there is an industry that you think is very pertinent to what the work you're doing, then, by all means, look at opportunities for doing your placement there. This includes then situations where, you may have within a corporate setting research and development teams very specifically, and in which they might, particularly welcome your skills and your ideas to come in to work with them in enhancing their own work in that. And of course, it includes placements in social enterprises, which, kind of cross the divide between kind of the third sector and private enterprise, but which have a kind of social dimension to it, which are also very distinctly enterprise focused in that kind of way. So there's lots of possibilities there. Think expansively about both, what might be of interest to you, but also where your skills that you bring might be of interest potentially to people. And then, of course, there's government and third sector placement. So it might be thinking about, could be local government, regional government, and national government offices, and policy making, in which you as a researcher might be contributing to the work that they're doing in relationship to the kinds of things that interest you and the sorts of skills and knowledge that you bring. The public sector initiatives that are coming forward could be very specific sorts of work that people are doing in relationship to the sorts of things that you're interested in. It could be NGOs, civil society organizations, in one way or another, that are charitably funded, that you might want to think about and consider in relationship to your placement possibilities. Next slide, please, Jenny. You can also think about doing academic placements. I think in SENS, we are certainly keen to encourage you to think expansively beyond academia, but it is possible to think about academic placement. So research assistant internships or collaborations with research institutes within universities. The key thing here, however, is this, that your placement must be working outside of your existing research supervisors or their labs or research teams. In other words, the placement is not simply meant to be a continuation of that work that you are already doing with your supervisors. So you need to be thinking about, if you want to do an academic placement, as it were, thinking about working with research leaders and teams who are independent from your supervisory team. And really, again, it's not that we would say that that's not a possibility. It is also something that is worth looking at. But certainly within SENS, we would like you to think more expansively about the kind of possibilities for placements that you might have and are able to undertake. Now, a note about international placements. It is possible to undertake an international placement. However, the amount of funding that we have available to support placements is quite limited. Jenny will say more about that in the end. But we would expect that most of you will undertake a placement to be undertaken in the UK. And in this respect, the international placement is quite different from an overseas institutional visit, which is really about you doing institutional visits, say in a university outside of the UK, and developing your particular research areas of interest and things like that. So it's not impossible to do international placement, but we would normally encourage you, unless you are able to access other sources of funding, to think about your placement being within the UK. Let's go on to the next slide, please, Jenny. Okay, just going to give you a few examples, and these are all from people who undertook placements in SENS Doctoral Training Partnership 1. And this was under slightly different conditions insofar as this was not a kind of thing written into their expectation as a PhD student. So this was all done on a voluntary basis. They applied to do a placement and things like this. The length of time might be variable for them. But it helps give you a sense of what some other people have already been doing. So we have one researcher who was a SENS, previous SENS DTP1 researcher, who undertook a placement as a research associate with a third sector organization. And they completed a qualitative research project with that sector, which contributed to a wider impact study for that third sector organization. And some of the outputs included, for them personally, building skills and experience in undertaking research in a non-university environment, and they help acquire an understanding of how impact from research within that third sector organization was used to inform policymaking. So a really interesting example there. Let's move on to the next example. So we've got another researcher who undertook a placement as a policy intern with a devolved government department, and they helped to provide researcher briefings and develop policy briefs to support members of that department within the devolved government department. And again, it was about acquiring a better understanding of how academics and policymakers could engage in mutually beneficial collaborations, and through that they were able to develop further their oral and written communication skills and experience. And just again to note, this was something that a number of you indicated in your development needs analysis is an area that you would really like kind of support in developing, and placements is a perfect opportunity, particularly for you to develop those communication skills in communicating to audiences, particularly beyond an academic setting. Let's look at the next one, Jenny. So another researcher who took a placement as a policy and business engagement researcher with a charity. And this was, providing input into the organization's annual report and their ongoing studies, represented the organization as part of several NGO and academic coalitions, and was also involved in disseminating research reports with external stakeholders. So quite a wide remit that they had. And again, similar sorts of things, gaining insight into policy making, developing further their knowledge of that sector, and improving their employability through relevant experience and network building in that situation. Do we have one more case study, or is that it? It was just three, just the three. Hopefully that gives you a sense, right? I mean, I know this kind of abstract, we've kind of kept it anonymous, Jenny will be telling you more about an event we're planning with the Cambridge DTP in the early summer, which will enable you to hear directly from people who had this previous experience of doing this. But let's move on then with those kind of case studies in mind. So we're beginning to think about your placement and the sorts of placements that you might want to do. Some things for you to think about. Um, really important is thinking about what are the sorts of skills that you might want to acquire, and that might help shape the sorts of placement then you select as being best suited to you. And again, it should provide opportunities for acquiring both technical and transferable skills that you've identified as part of your development needs analysis. So, kind of going back and thinking about what are those things that you've identified there and how might that shape what you want to do for your placement. Thinking about the career pathway fit, is the placement aligned with your longer term career goals, whether in academia or industry? What is its networking potential? Looking for placements that offer access to that wider network of professionals and experts. What is it, again, how does that relate with your kind of career trajectory, how you're thinking about developing through your PhD and post-PhD? It's important to think about logistics and practicalities, right? Um, to think about, the kind of, if you're thinking about a placement and you're actually not physically able to get there because of the logistical demands, um, that's probably a non-starter, right? So think very carefully about your own constraints. I mean, so many of you will have other sorts of responsibilities and things that you need to factor into this. So, by all means, think ambitiously, think about, how it fits with what you want to do, but also think, practically. We understand this. And it may be that much better to do a placement with somebody that's, proximate to you, than try and do something that is just not achievable or feasible for you to do. A final point for you to be thinking about is the way in which the placements, expand your research horizons. And think about the way in which the placements might offer opportunity to apply and further hone your research skills, insights, and understanding through professional practice through addressing new or complementary research questions or problems. Now, the ESRC has been quite clear in suggesting that the placement should not be seen as a kind of simply an extension to the core research that you're doing, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you might not acquire new insights or understandings that are directly relevant to the research that you're doing, and that makes a lot of sense to us. But it's really about thinking about how does the placement expand those research horizons. How can you take those skills that you have and apply them within a new situation, as well as offering opportunities to enhance the kind of understanding and insight which might very well be relevant to the sort of thesis work that you're doing. But the key differentiating factor is that the placement is not, you should not see that necessarily as the kind of just another opportunity for producing core data for your research thesis. That's the key thing. Now, one thing to consider though is in terms of any sort of research that you might be involved in with an organization, and our expectation is that they will be alongside of you setting the agenda for that research, but just ensure that you've cleared any kind of ethical review and approval. Now, we would hope and expect that most of the partners or that you would work with in placements, that they will be attentive to that, but you should certainly also be attentive to that yourselves in thinking about that. So even if the research is completely, entirely separate from your PhD, there's prospects that you might want to later do a publication about that research, right? Make sure you've done the ethical approval for any research that you do as part of your placement. And just in answer to your question, Mazen, we will make sure that the PowerPoint presentation is available. It'll be posted on the VLE for you, together with a recording of today's session. So you'll have it available there. Next slide, please, Jenny. Okay. I think I'm handing over to you. Is that right?
Yeah.
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 Great.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so I'm going to be talking briefly about different ways that you can find placement opportunities. So the main source of information for you will be on the SENSS VLE. We're going to put on there any placement opportunities that we come across and any partnership opportunities that we've got for placements, and we're also going to be sending out emails with all the different opportunities as well, just to ensure that you don't miss anything. Mark mentioned it briefly earlier, but we're also going to be organising a forthcoming research and practice workshop with the Cambridge DTP, and that will be a training session and kind of information session on placements and hearing from previous participants and a networking opportunity, etc. You should also take advantage of your own supervisors and advisors on your research teams. They're all going to have industry and government or third sector connections and collaboration possibilities that you can tap into. So that's a good resource for you. Also, any of your own local university career services, they should have placement listings, job fairs, careers workshops. They'll also be able to help you writing your CV as part of any placement application process, and kind of tips and guidance on how to approach potential placement partners. So make sure you're looking to see what's available locally as well as through SENSS. Also, at your individual partner universities, there should be the equivalent of a research enterprise and knowledge exchange office. They may call it something slightly different at your institution. They will definitely have links with industries, civic engagement partners, different collaboration networks, etc. So you should definitely try to approach them for kind of ideas or schemes that they may be aware of. If you don't know who to contact at your own individual institution, ask your administrative or academic lead at your institution, and their details are all on the SENSS VLE, so you'll be able to contact them as a first point of contact. Also, at any professional conferences or events that you're at, these are great networking opportunities. There may be organisations presenting there or exhibiting. Use those opportunities. Talk to people there that may have been out on placement, see where they've been. If anyone is demonstrating there, etc., talk to them, find out different possibilities, examples that may be around there. And also online. There's going to be loads of stuff online, places like LinkedIn, Indeed, specific academic platforms like ResearchGate. All of the main kind of central schemes, particularly like ones like UKRI, but also industry-specific ones, they will advertise online. So use that resource as well. So in terms of how to look at securing a placement, first of all, you need to do your research. Look at where you might want to go, potential placements. Make sure you're looking early. Certain schemes will have kind of timelines attached to them where they have application deadlines. It may only be a yearly or 6 monthly kind of call for applications for placements. So make sure you're getting your research in early so that you don't miss out on any opportunities. And again, use multiple channels like we said in the previous slide, university, online job boards, networking through your supervisor. If there is an application process for the placement opportunity that you're interested in, make sure that your CV and covering letter or any relevant application form for the placement itself is tailored to that placement and what they're looking for in terms of the skills and person specification, etc. Make sure you're highlighting what you can bring to the table, what your research skills and achievements are, so that you kind of stand out above other applicants. If there's any interviews as part of the application process, make sure you're preparing for that. So again, you can put across your best self to demonstrate your transferable skills, how they align with the placement opportunity, how you're the right fit for that particular post. And if it's specifically if it's not one where there is an application process, if it's somewhere where you're approaching an industry or a partner yourself and saying, I'd like to do a placement there, they may not have a kind of pre-described setup scheme. It may be something that you want to negotiate with them individually. Make sure you're following up regularly. Don't just kind of send one email and think, oh, they don't want to know. Be persistent, express your continued interest, show enthusiasm, and particularly after, if you have had an interview and application, say thank you for the opportunity. You can follow it up saying about, again, realigning why you think you're a good fit for that particular post. And then once you've got the placement, hopefully in place, you then need to discuss your kind of project timelines, any financial support that the placement host can bring you, and to make sure that it's being accommodating with your PhD commitments. As we said, the placement is for 3 months. That's 3 months full-time. Your placement may be part-time, so you may be doing the placement alongside your research. So you need to make sure that you allow time for both. And particularly if it's, one that's online or you're doing remotely or hybridly, you need to make sure that the two are aligning. So just have that in mind as well. Okay. You may come across some challenges when you're trying to identify and secure your placements. So one of them may be the lack of relevant opportunities. You may have kind of looked in all the traditional places, and then you may not have found anywhere that is kind of the right fit for you. Broaden your search efforts. Think outside the box. Look at elsewhere. Extend your network. Really try and find any hidden or niche opportunities to find the right fit for you. In terms of competition, particularly for any national kind of placement opportunities, there may be a lot of people applying for the same post. So you need to make sure that you're standing out, emphasize what makes you unique, what your contributions and skills and professional aspirations are to make sure that you're the one that gets hired or selected for that post. Time management, again, may be a challenge. As we said before, you need to make the placement can be flexible, but if it is flexible, you need to make sure that it's fitting in with your other commitments and research projects so that you can give your full ability to the placement and full time. And funding, again, as we said, there is funding available, but it is limited. So you should definitely be having conversations with your placement host about any contributions towards travel, accommodation, etc., that they can provide. Because it's a two-way thing, the placement. You're obviously going to get a lot out of doing it, but the placement host is going to utilize your skills and have your experience, and they're going you bring something to the table as well. So it's definitely a conversation that you can have in terms of financial contributions with the placement host. So the application process, so this is for applying for the SENSS placement funding now. So there's an application form that you'll need to complete, and that's available on the VLE. And this is where you need to set out what the placement is, what you want to do, what you're going to be doing whilst you're there, and any costs that are associated with that, so in terms of travel, accommodation, etc. We'd like you to submit your application 3 months before your placement start date. And this is just so that it gives us enough time to review your application. If we've got any follow-up or clarification that we need, it gives us time to get that from you. And also, there may be practical details that you need to sort out in terms of, if you've got to temporarily move home, or if you've got to sort out travel details or setting stuff up with the placement host, etc. So just be mindful that these things do take time. So make sure that you're planning appropriately. We will need on the application form a supporting statement from your supervisor and placement host. That is all detailed on there, so we do need that. So please make sure that's included. And also, as Mark referred to earlier, if there is any kind of ethical approval or local risk assessment at your own home institutions, you need to make sure that that's followed and you've got that in place before you go out on placement as well. Okay, so the placement funding itself, there's up to £1,000 that you can claim in reasonable costs. So this will include things like travel expenses, any insurance that's not already covered from your own university's insurance policies, any accommodation, that kind of thing. It doesn't include any fieldwork expenses or any expenses related to third parties, such as family members, etc., and any expenses that may have incurred before the placement was approved. If £1,000 isn't quite enough, you can apply to use the RTSG fund if you need to top up the placement funding, and that would involve a separate application under the RTSG process, but referring that it's for your placement, etc. And again, just the same point, you should also discuss with your placement host whether they can offer you any financial support, and that's a conversation you can have at the beginning when you're sorting out terms and conditions and start dates, etc. So when you've submitted your application, it will be looked at by Mark and myself, and we'll be looking to make sure that all the sections of the form are completed, there's no information missing, that you've got those important supporting letters or statements from your supervisor and placement host. We'll be looking to make sure you meet the eligibility criteria. If any of you are on a master's year, you're not able to take part in the placement on your master's year, but you can submit an application for the placement to take place after in your substantial PhD section. We'll also be wanting you to articulate on the form the purpose of the placement, what it's about, where you're going to be, what you're going to gain from it, and how that relates back to the development needs that were advertised on your DNA, and what value the placement is going to bring to you, what you're going to get out of it. Very important one, we are going to need a detailed work plan of what the placement entails, what you're going to be doing, and how that relates to your previous research and training, and how the work program will relate to your training development needs. So what you're doing on the placement, how that's going to meet where your skills gaps are, etc. And there's also a section on the form for the budget, so where you've got to provide reasonable and justified costings, and just kind of, we're not asking for, because we're not asking for exacts at the moment, but just kind of like ballpark figures. So if you know you're going to have to go into London every day, 5 days a week, you know, how much travel card's going to be, or the daily train fare, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be exact, but just a, you know, idea. Okay, and that was the last one. Did we want to talk about the Cambridge bit first, Mark, and then come back to questions?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. So, kind of the next steps after this, we are going to be organising other kind of trainings and sessions on placement. And one of the ones that we've got arranged over the next few months is a research and practice showcase workshop. And we're doing this in collaboration with the University of Cambridge DTP. A date to put in your diaries, and you will obviously have further communications about this sent out. But on the 18th of June is when this event is going to be happening. It's going to be happening in London, so it's quite central for everyone involved. We haven't got the exact venue confirmed as of yet, but it will be in London, and we'll let you know, obviously, when that is confirmed. And this event will give you kind of a chance to hear from people across both the SENSS DTP1 and the Cambridge DTP, of participants who've undergone a placement, how they went about it, what they learnt. And we're going to try and get a broad mix of different sectors and different placement providers of where people have gone, so you're going to get a real good sense of what's out there and how people have got their placement and what they've got out of it, etc. There's also going to be time for you to brainstorm your own ideas for your placement plans. So if you think you might want to do it in a charity, for example, then you'll have someone hopefully who's been at a charity, and you can kind of share ideas and gain information around that, etc. And it also gives you the opportunity to network with researchers across SENSS, but also the SENSS DTP1 researchers that have been out on placements, and the Cambridge DTP. So that will give you a real good opportunity to do that. Okay, so just go back to the questions part, and then I will stop recording. I will be kind of transcribing any questions and kind of doing like a Q&A document as well. So don't feel like you've got to write anything down, because it will happen. It will be on there as well.
Great.
Okay.
Jenny, there's a couple questions already. One is in the chat and one is in the actual